Yep, that's me. And you're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the channel. Now, in my build menu right here, I have probably the most dangerous creation I've ever made, because this thing, just merely spawning it into this map, runs the risk of completely breaking your entire game pretty much permanently. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at my campaign map here, you may notice that it is not completely explored anymore, and I only have 2 out of 140 artifacts where I used to have 100% of them. That is because my original save file is completely corrupted after building what I've built. So if you haven't seen my first attempt at this, I tried to build a wind-powered strand beast. This is inspired by the original strand beast made by Theo Jansen, which looks like this in real life. Now, the end result was that I could get it to kind of work if I powered the servos manually, but I could not get it to work based on wind powered alone. It would always lock up. So I decided that wasn't good enough for me, and I went back and I tried to fix it. And this video is the story about how I turned this failure into something so successful that it broke my entire save file. All right, so we're actually transitioning over into my video editing program because I've actually already recorded the process of building this because I was so determined to fix this thing that I didn't want to be distracted by trying to be entertaining and figuring out what to say while I was building this. I just wanted to sit down and focus on the pure building aspect. But I recorded the build so I could go back later and highlight some of the key points that happened and epiphanies that occurred that led to the end result that we're gonna see at the end of this video. So the first thing I decided to do was try to be a little bit more precise with the measurements, and I started off by making myself an actual grid. And this was going to help me be able to figure out how much distance I actually had in between things. And the problem is, I started off a little bit ambitious. Even the grid itself was already exceeding complexity, so I just had to enable the complexity mod and raise it up to 2000. And then I made the mistake of making this thing even bigger. And then I made the mistake of deciding, wait, I want this thing to be vertical, not horizontal. And that was the first time my game crashed. Exceeding the complexity limit with mods is not a safe strategy in Trailmakers. But that wasn't gonna stop me, so I hopped back in, I remade a smaller, more reasonable grid, and then I had this image on my second monitor, and my thought process was, I'm going to actually try to pay attention to these measurements more this time, rather than just eyeballing it. So I figured my starting point was gonna be this segment right here, which is the mechanical thing that turns and creates the motion of the legs. And this is 15. So I decided to simplify this grid where each block is gonna be 5, so then 3 of these blocks would be the length of my starting segment. So that was kind of like my baseline, but I made a critical mistake in my first attempt at recreating this leg using more precise measurements. So as I scrub through here, you can see me placing these different points. These are to kind of mark off the different link points, the different flex points of the leg, and I started to try to connect them. But I made one critical error when I was designing this leg, and it is kind of highlighted right here. You may notice, although this looks fine as a thing on its own, the big problem that this ended up causing me was I aligned it too much with the grid. You may notice all of these bearings are perfectly in line with each other, and they kind of go at right angles to these bearings, right angle to that bearing, because I'm existing in a 90-degree build grid, and that was just the easier way to do it. But you may notice in the original picture, the whole structure isn't really aligned straight up and down in relation to the starting point, which is over here. So let's find out how far this strategy got me. All right, so I built it out until I got it to the point finally where I was ready for my first test. And this is how the very first test went. It literally tore itself apart. And yep, another try. I was like, maybe it was just a fluke. It gets stuck right here, and then it ends up tearing itself apart. And there was just an issue down here with this was going way too far and colliding with itself. And this is just not this is just not gonna work at all. Obviously, this is not how the mechanism is supposed to look, but I tried to modify it. I tried to make it stronger. I tried to adjust a couple measurements, and then this was the end result that I ended up with for this leg. And I have this platform down here for reference so you can see how flat the foot is in its walking cycle. And as you can see, there's pretty much a point where it is flat on the ground, and it just lifts up from there. Here, I'll replay it again. So it's just constantly going up on this diagonal, and I knew that that just was not gonna cut it. So I ended up literally scrapping the entire thing, deleting it all, and deciding I need to start from a different strategy, a different foundational approach. And that is when I found this video, which is by David Rector. So apparently he had input this linkage into some other type of program that has grid lines, and that was exactly what I was looking for. So now, instead of paying attention to all these numbers and measurements and everything, I decided I'm just gonna ignore all that, and I'm only gonna pay attention to these grid blocks. If one of my grid blocks is equal to one of these grid blocks, I can just try to use this as my reference for building the leg. And for my starting point, I decided to use this starting line segment in its pointing down position from the rotation point. And you may notice that the rest of the leg is not aligned 90 degrees to the grid. All of these have like some parallelogram angles. Nothing is really 90 degrees from the next thing. So now pay attention to where all of these points are in relation to each other. So back over here, I went through my grid, and you may notice that I placed all of these points pretty much exactly in relation to the grid where the points there were. And then it was just a matter of connecting them all in the right way. I didn't have to care about the segment lengths or anything like that. It was literally just all guided by the grid. So I actually went ahead and deleted the grid after I had all these points here. And then it was just a matter of drawing, like connecting the dots, literally connecting the dots and making sure that all the linkages were going to be able to flex in the right way. So I went through and did all that, and I ended up with this as my first test. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, look at that. This is actually going kind of flat. Like, it may not be a perfect replica because obviously we're on a much less precise grid, but it's still a better rough estimate than what I was working with before. So I'm like, okay, let's go and add another leg and see how they are in relation to each other. And I was like, hey man, this is looking pretty good. I think I've got my linkage all sorted out here. Now let's try to actually make it walk. So I added another set of legs. This was looking good too. This is looking really good actually. I kept on going. I duplicated that and put it on the ground, and things were a little bit wonky. I realized later that I forgot to reverse the mirrored sides, so they were actually kind of competing with each other, trying to turn. But one of the other major improvements that this thing needed over the previous version was I've added a third set of legs. So now there are 6 individual sections. So then rather than each segment being offset by 180 degrees, I had to then offset each segment by 120 degrees. And then that resulted in this. This was the most successful and smoothest walking mechanic I had ever achieved with this system. It actually looks like it's doing what it's supposed to do, but it's still not wind powered. There's a manual, very strong torque going into this system. This didn't answer whether or not this was going to be able to be freely moving from an external force. So I decided I'm gonna test it with thrusters, because even though there's not wind in this map, these thrusters are an external force from the linkage system, and if just applying pressure to this system allows it to freely rotate, theoretically, the wind should work just as well. So this is how the thruster experiment went. Took a little bit to get started, but look, it's practically running. And this to me was like, this should work. I think it's ready. It's ready for the high seas map. It's ready to put some sails on it. So I jumped over into the high seas map and I started putting sails on this thing. And the initial tests, it was actually kind of working, but it was struggling a little bit. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's add some more sails to this thing, make it a little bit stronger. And then I was ready to test it with these sails. I got out of the build mode and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm a little bit too close to the edge here. Let me reset, go back to the other side because the wind's pushing from that side. And then this is what happened. I jumped and I died. And then when the game tried to respawn me, I got an instant critical error. And I thought no big deal, just gotta load back in and try again, but there's an issue with the high seas map. When you load into the high seas map, it automatically attempts to spawn in the last creation you had used. And that creation violates the build limit. So I was permanently stuck with this critical error every single time I tried to open up the high seas map. And that brings us where we are today in this brand new fresh high seas map with no progress on it, because unfortunately I had to remove that save file because it was corrupted and create a brand new one if I ever wanted to spawn in with the wind again. So now, for the first time on camera, I'm going to attempt to spawn in this newly updated version. Oh, and I just realized, hold on, I can't even spawn this thing in until I actually... Oh no, please don't crash. I'm stuck. I'm actually stuck in this menu right now. I can't... Uh-oh. Oh no. Oh, I made a mistake. I've just completely frozen my game, and I'm pretty sure I corrupted yet another save file. All right, I'm just gonna quit. I haven't actually spawned in with that creation yet, I don't think, so it might not be corrupted. Please. Please let me spawn it in. I told you guys, this creation... Oh, no. Literally, oh, no. All right, so I've got to go back and delete this new save file and create a new save file if I'm going to be able to show you guys this. I'm going to show you. I am determined this thing works. I know it works. I just have to have one successful spawn in without crashing and corrupting my game. All right, we're back. Every single time I do this, I have to sit through the unskippable intro cutscene again. Yeah, I don't care. Just let me skip, please. It doesn't let you skip. Next thing I'm gonna do is actually fly back up to the spawn point because I've got nothing uncovered on my map right now. Don't worry, I've already been through this like 5 times. Okay, we're up here. I think I'm ready. Another attempt to spawn in this walker that I have spent so long trying to make. So the idea is that it should walk on wind power alone. These sails should catch the wind and it should walk from this side to the other. And then I can declare this finally a successful Strand Beast recreation. Okay, here we go. Yes. Yes, it's working. It's working all by itself. Wind power alone. Go, Strand Beast, go. I wish we had a longer runway to walk, but the wind is going in this direction. Okay, bye, Strand Beast. I put so much effort in for that little demonstration right there. Okay, I'm gonna try to go back and do that again so we can get another sample, but I gotta try to not die this time. Spawn in. There, whoa, oh, I almost spawned it in too far back, but look at this. There's no input, no power input going whatsoever. Hands-free, just wind power alone. Everything works great. One of the biggest factors. Oh, no. Okay. It wasn't ready for that little divot there. But yeah, one of the biggest factors to making this thing a success. Uh-oh. This isn't good. If I spawn, is it going to crash the game? Oh, it doesn't spawn the creation when I do that. Interesting. Yeah, one of the biggest factors contributing to the success was actually giving it 3 sets of legs instead of 2. So that way they can cover more... Okay, the game crashed again, so that's another corrupted save file. I'm not going to be able to open that world again. But basically, it smoothens out the walking motion a lot more by giving it 3 sets of legs instead of 2, because there's less space in between each step. But as you can see, this is clearly one of the most volatile and dangerous creations I've ever built. It is just that complex of a thing to try to build in this game that the game just cannot handle it. So I hope you appreciate the effort I put into bringing you a successful working version of this, because you're probably never going to see it again outside of this video, because it's just too dangerous to be kept alive. It has to be locked away somewhere very, very tight. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, you'll probably enjoy some other recreations that you can find on this playlist on the end screen right here. Hope this video has earned your subscription. Anyway, this has been ScrapMan, and I'll see you next time. Bye.